An Apple Pie by Kate Greenway. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. An Apple Pie by Kate Greenway. A. Apple pie. B. Bit it. C. Cut it. D. Dealt it. E. Eat it. F. Fought for it. G. Got it. H. Had it. J. Jumped for it. K. Knelt for it. L. Longed for it. M. Mourned for it. N. Nodded for it. O. Opened it. P. Peeped in it. Q. Quartered it. R. Ran for it. S. Sang for it. T. Took it. U, V, W, X, Y, and Z all had a large slice and went off to bed. End of An Apple Pie by Kate Greenway. Read by Melissa Staggs.
Arachne the Weaver by Norma Carson. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Minerva, you will remember, was one of the daughters of the god Jupiter. Now Minerva liked to believe that she could do many wonderful things. She was very proud of her ability, for instance, to weave beautiful fabrics, and she did not wish to think that anyone else could do this so well. There was, however, among the people on the earth a certain charming young girl. Her name was Arachne, and she was known throughout Greece for the fineness of her needlework and the skill with which she could manage a shuttle. The webs that she spun were light as the air and wonderful as the rainbow in their colors. Arachne, too, was proud of her talents. It was not wise, you know, to displease any of the gods or goddesses. Mortals were not expected to be as clever as the gods. It was therefore very foolish of the girl Arachne to boast of her powers to spin. That was what she did, however, and Minerva heard about it. In fact, when Arachne's friends told her that the goddess Minerva was a wonderful spinner, Arachne laughed and declared that not Minerva herself could spin so beautifully as she. Thereupon Minerva determined to put Arachne to the test. She sent a messenger to the girl. "Will you enter a spinning contest with the goddess Minerva?" Arachne was asked. "With Minerva or with any one else," was the boastful reply. At this Minerva was indeed angry, but she did not want to be too hard on Arachne. She therefore disguised herself as an old woman and went to visit the young spinner. She watched her at her work and was amazed at her skill. It was a pity, she thought, to bring misfortune upon this beautiful child. She spoke to Arachne regarding the contest with Minerva. She begged her not to try to excel the goddess in spinning. "Try any mortal," she pleaded, "but do not try to rival a goddess." When people are young, however, they are daring, and Arachne would not listen to reason. "If I do better work than Minerva," she said, "I will take the consequences. I do not need your advice. Let Minerva come, and we shall see which is the better spinner." At that Minerva dropped her disguise and responded, "So be it. Minerva is here." Arachne was now a little frightened, for she realized that she had not spoken respectfully to the goddess. She persisted, however, in her determination to surpass Minerva. Then the contest began. Each sat before her loom and arranged the threads. A group of nymphs, Attendants upon the goddess stood around watching. Minerva wove a series of pictures that showed her in various struggles with Neptune, god of the sea. Then she pictured herself punishing those mortals who had dared to defy her. She made her work an object lesson to the girl who sat beside her, and who would doubtless suffer through her anxiety to prove herself the better spinner of the two. The warnings of Minerva had no effect upon Arachne. She went on weaving. Her piece of work showed the gods doing evil things. It expressed Arachne's contempt for the immortals. She could have chosen nothing more dangerous to do. She was so beautiful, however, sitting at her loom, and the work she wrought was so wonderful, that even the goddess herself could not help admiring her. Notwithstanding, the moment came when Minerva could bear with the girl's defiance no longer. She went over to Arachne's loom and tore away the beautiful web. Then she said to Arachne, "You have tried to put the gods to shame. Now you shall be punished." At that she waved her hand, and suddenly Arachne drooped. A terrible remorse seemed to fill her. She was an object of shame. With a little cry she tied herself to the loom and hung there. Very soon she was dead. Minerva felt sorry for her when she saw her thus helpless. She determined to transform her into something living. She waved her hand again over the dead girl, and Arachne's hair fell away. Her body seemed to shrivel, and her hands and feet became long legs. She was a spider. In this way Minerva caused Arachne to live again in a different form and to go on spinning. All through the ages since, the spider has woven its webs and has hung by the thread with which it has spun. End of Arachne the Weaver, by Norma Carson. Read by Betty B.
Baba Yaga by Viera Xenofontovna Kalimatiano de Blumenthal. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sandra Schmidt. Baba Yaga. Somewhere, I cannot tell you exactly where, but certainly in vast Russia, there lived a peasant with his wife, and they had twins, son and daughter. One day the wife died, and the husband mourned over her very sincerely for a long time. 1 year passed, and 2 years, and even longer. But there is no order in a house without a woman, and the day came when the man thought, "If I marry again, possibly it would turn out all right." And so he did, and had children by his second wife. The stepmother was envious of the stepson and daughter, and began to use them hardly. She scolded them without any reason, sent them away from home as often as she wished, and gave them scarcely enough to eat. Finally she wanted to get rid of them altogether. Do you know what it means to allow a wicked thought to enter one's heart? The wicked thought grows all the time like a poisonous plant, and slowly kills the good thoughts. A wicked feeling was growing in the stepmother's heart, and she determined to send the children to the witch, thinking sure enough that they would never return. "Dear children," she said to the orphans, "go to my grandmother who lives in the forest in a hut on hen's feet. You will do everything she wants you to, and she will give you sweet things to eat, and you will be happy." The orphans started out, but instead of going to the witch, the sister, a bright little girl, took her brother by the hand and ran to their own old grandmother, and told her all about their going to the forest. "Oh, my poor darlings," said the good old grandmother, pitying the children, "my heart aches for you, but it is not in my power to help you. You have to go not to a loving grandmother, but to a wicked witch. Now listen to me, my darlings," she continued. "I will give you a hint. Be kind and good to everyone. Do not speak ill words to anyone. Do not despise helping the weakest, and always hope that for you too there will be the needed help." The good old grandmother gave the children some delicious fresh milk to drink, and to each a big slice of ham. She also gave them some cookies. There are cookies everywhere. And when the children departed, she stood looking after them a long time. The obedient children arrived at the forest, and oh wonder, there stood a hut, and what a curious one! It stood on tiny hen's feet, and at the top was a rooster's head. With their shrill childish voices they called out loud, Izbushka, Izbushka, turn thy back to the forest and thy front to us. The hut did as they commanded. The two orphans looked inside, and saw the witch resting there, her head near the threshold, one foot in one corner, the other foot in the other corner, and her knees quite close to the ridge-pole. "Foo, foo, foo!" exclaimed the witch. "I feel the Russian spirit." The children were afraid, and stood close, very close together, but in spite of their fear, they said very politely, "Oh, grandmother, our stepmother sent us to thee, to serve thee." "All right, I am not opposed to keeping you, children. If you satisfy all my wishes, I shall reward you. If not, I shall eat you up." Without any delay, the witch ordered the girl to spin the thread, and the boy, her brother, to carry water in a sieve to fill a big tub. The poor orphan girl wept at her spinning wheel, and wiped away her bitter tears. At once all around her appeared small mice, squeaking and saying, "Sweet girl, do not cry. Give us cookies, and we will help thee." The little girl willingly did so. "Now," gratefully squeaked the mice, "go and find the black cat. He is very hungry. Give him a slice of ham, and he will help thee." The girl speedily went in search of the cat, and saw her brother in great distress about the tub. So many times he had filled that sieve, yet the tub was still dry. The little birds passed, flying near by, and chirped to the children. "Kind-hearted little children, give us some crumbs, and we will advise you." The orphans gave the birds some crumbs, and the grateful birds chirped again. "Some clay and water, children dear." Then away they flew through the air. The children understood the hint, spat in the sieve, plastered it up with clay, and filled the tub in a very short time. Then they both returned to the hut, and on the threshold met the black cat. They generously gave him some of the good ham which their good grandmother had given them, petted him, and asked, "Dear kitty cat, black and pretty, tell us what to do in order to get away from thy mistress the witch." "Well," very seriously answered the cat, "I will give you a towel and a comb, and then you must run away. When you hear the witch running after you, drop the towel behind your back, and a large river will appear in place of the towel. If you hear her once more, throw down the comb, and in place of the comb there will appear a dark wood. This wood will protect you from the wicked witch, my mistress." Baba Yaga came home just then. "Is it not wonderful?" she thought. "Everything is exactly right. Well," she said to the children, "today you were brave and smart. Let us see tomorrow. Your work will be more difficult, and I hope I shall eat you up." The poor orphans went to bed, not a warm bed prepared by loving hands, but on the straw in a cold corner. Nearly scared to death from fear, they lay there, afraid to talk, afraid to even breathe. The next morning the witch ordered all the linen to be woven, and a large supply of firewood to be brought from the forest. The children took the towel and comb, and ran away as fast as their feet could possibly carry them. The dogs were after them, but they threw them the cookies that were left. The gates didn't open themselves, but the children smoothed them with oil. The birch tree near the path almost scratched their eyes out, but the gentle girl fastened a pretty ribbon to it. So they went farther and farther, and ran out of the dark forest into the wide, sunny fields. The cat sat down by the loom and tore the thread to pieces, doing it with delight. Baba Yaga returned. "Where are the children?" she shouted, and began to beat the cat. "Why hast thou let them go, thou treacherous cat? Why hast thou not scratched their faces?" The cat answered, "Well, it was because I have served thee so many years, and thou hast never given me a bite, while the dear children gave me some good ham." The witch scolded the dogs, the gates, and the birch tree near the path. "Well," barked the dogs, "thou certainly art our mistress, but thou hast never done us a favour, and the orphans were kind to us." The gates replied, "We were always ready to obey thee, but thou didst neglect us, and the dear children smoothed us with oil. The birch tree lisped with its leaves, "Thou hast never put a simple thread over my branches, and the little darlings adorned them with a pretty ribbon." Baba Yaga understood that there was no help, and started to follow the children herself. In her great hurry she forgot to look for the towel and the comb, but jumped astride a broom, and was off. The children heard her coming, and threw the towel behind them. At once a river, wide and blue, appeared and watered the field. Baba Yaga hopped along the shore until she finally found a shallow place and crossed it. Again the children heard her hurry after them, and so they threw down the comb. This time a forest appeared, a dark and dusky forest, in which the roots were interwoven, the branches matted together, and the tree tops touching each other. The witch tried very hard to pass through, but in vain, and so, very, very angry, she returned home. The orphans rushed to their father, told him all about their great distress, and thus concluded their pitiful story. "O father dear, why dost thou love us less than our brothers and sisters?" The father was touched and became angry. He sent the wicked stepmother away, and lived a new life with his good children. From that time he watched over their happiness, and never neglected them any more. How do I know this story is true? Why, one was there who told me about it. End of Baba Yaga by Viera Xenofontovna Kalimatiano de Blumenthal.
The Fairy Box by Louisa May Alcott. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Read by Telly Tiger and Annie Maas.
I wish I had a magic bracelet just like Rosamond's that would prick me when I was going to do wrong,
said little Mary as she put down the story she had been reading. There was no one else in the room, but she heard a sweet voice sing these words close to her ear.
Now hark, little May, if you want to do right, under your pillow, just look every night. If you have been good all through the day, a gift you will find, useful or gay. But if you have been cross, selfish, or wild, a bad thing will come for the naughty child. So try, little dear, and soon you will see how easy and sweet to grow good it will be.
May was very surprised at this, and looked everywhere to see who spoke, but could find no one.
I guess I dreamed it, but my eyes are wide open. I can't make up poetry asleep or awake.
As he said that, someone laughed, and the same voice sang again.
Ha ha, you can't see, although I am here, but listen to what I say in your ear. Tell no one of this, because if you do, my fun will be spoilt, and so will yours too. But if you are good and patient and gay, a real fairy will come to see little May. Oh, how splendid that will be! I'll try hard and be as good as an angel. If only I could get one peep at a live fairy. I always said there were such people, and now I shall know how they look,
cried the little girl, so pleased that she danced all about the room, clapping her hands. Something bright darted out of the window from among the flowers that stood there, and no more songs were heard, so May knew that the elf had gone.
I've got to find secret all to myself, and I'll keep it carefully. I wonder what present will come tonight.
She sat thinking this was a very interesting play. She was very good all day, and made no fuss about going to bed, though usually she fretted and wanted to play, and called for water, and plagued poor Nursie in many ways. She got safely into her little nest, and then was in such a hurry to see what was under her pillow, that she forgot and called out crossly,
Do hurry and go away. Don't wait to hang up my clothes, you slow old thing. Go, go.
That hurt Nurse's feeling, and she went away without her good-night kiss. But May didn't care, and felt under the pillow, the minute the door was shut. A lamp was always left burning, so she could see the little gold box she drew out.
How pretty! I hope there is some candy in it,
she said, opening it very carefully. Oh dear, what do you think happened? A wasp flew out and stung her lips. Then both wasp and box vanished, and May was left to cry alone, with a sharp pain in the lips that said the unkind words.
What a dreadful present! I don't like that spiteful fairy who sends such horrid things.
She sobbed. Then she lay still and thought about it, for she dared not call anyone, because nobody must guess the secret. She knew in her own little heart that the crosswords hurt Nursey as the sting did her lips, and she felt sorry. At once the smart got better, and by the time she had resolved to ask the good old woman to forgive her, it was all gone. Next morning she kissed Nursey and begged pardon, and tried hard to be good till tea time. Then she ran to see what nice things they were going to have to eat, though she had often been told not to go into the dining room. No one was there, and on the table stood a dish of delicious little cakes, all white like snowballs.
I must have just a taste, and I'll tell Mama afterward,
she said, and before she knew it, one little cake was eaten all up.
Nobody will miss it, and I can have another at tea. Now a lump of sugar and a sip of cream before Mama comes. I so like to pick round.
Having done one wrong thing, May felt like going on, so she nibbled and meddled with all sorts of forbidden things, till she heard a step. Then she ran away, and by, when the bell rang, came in with the rest as prim and proper, as if she did not know how to play pranks. No one missed the cake, and her mother gave her another, saying,
There, dear, is a nice plummy one for my good child.
May turned red and wanted to tell what she'd done, but was ashamed because there was company, and people thought she blushed like a mother's little girl at being praised. But when she went to bed, she was almost afraid to look under the pillow, knowing that she had done wrong. At last she slowly drew out the box and slowly opened it, expecting something to fly at her. All she saw was a tiny black bag that began to grow larger, till it was big enough to hold her two hands. Then it tied itself tight around her wrist, as if to keep those meddlesome hands out of mischief.
Well, this is very queer, but not so dreadful as the wasp. I hope no one will see it when I'm asleep. I do wish I'd let those cakes and things alone,
sighed May, looking at the black bag and vainly trying to get her hands free. She cried herself to sleep, and when she woke, the bag was gone. No one had seen it, but she told her mamma about the cake and promised not to do so any more.
Now this shall be a truly good day, every bit of it,
she said as she skipped away, feeling as light as a feather after she had confessed her little sins. But alas, it is so easy to forget and do wrong, that May spoiled her day before dinner by going to the river and playing with the boats, in spite of many orders not to do it. She did not tell of it, and went to a party in the afternoon, where she was so merry she never remembered the naughty thing till she was in bed and opened the fairy box. A little chain appeared, which in a flash grew long and large, and fastened around her ankles as if she were a prisoner. May liked to tumble about, and was much disgusted to be chained in this way, but there was no help for it, so she lay very still and had plenty of time to be sorry.
It is a good punishment for me, and I deserve it. I won't cry, but I will remember.
And May said her prayers very soberly, really meaning to keep her word this time. All the next day she was very careful to keep her lips from cross words, her hands from forbidden things, and her feet from going wrong. Nothing spoiled this day. She watched so well, and when Mamma gave the good night kiss, she said,
"What shall I give my good little daughter, who has been gentle, obedient, and busy all day?" "I want a white kitty with blue eyes and a pink ribbon on its neck,"
answered May.
"I'll try to find one. Now go to bed, dearie, and happy dreams,"
said Mamma, with many kisses on the rosy cheeks and the smile that was a reward. May was so busy thinking about the kitty and the good day that she forgot the box till she heard the little
meow, meow,
under her pillow.
"Mercy me, what's that?"
And she popped up her head to see. Out came the box, off flew the lid, and there on a red cushion lay a white cat, about 2 inches long. May couldn't believe that it was alive till it jumped out of its nest, stretched itself, and grew all at once just the right size to play with and be pretty. Its eyes were blue, its tail like a white plume, and a sweet pink bow was on its neck. It danced all over the bed, ran up the curtains, hid under the clothes, nipped May's toes, licked her face, patted her nose with its soft paw, and winked at her in such a funny way that she laughed for joy at having such a dear kitty. Presently, as if it knew that the bed was a place to lie quiet in, Puss cuddled down in a little bunch and purred May to sleep.
"I suppose that darling kit will be gone like all the other things,"
said May as she waked up and looked round for her first pretty gift. No, there was the lovely thing, sitting in the sun among the flower pots, washing her face and getting ready for play. What a fine frolic they had, and how surprised everyone was to see just the pussy May wanted. They supposed it came, as kitties often come, and May never told them that it was a fairy present, because she had promised not to. She was so happy with little Puss that she was good all day, and when she went to bed she thought,
"I wish I had a dog to play with darling Snowdrop and run with me when I go to walk." "Bow, wow, wow!"
came from under the pillow, and out of the box tottered a curly black dog with long ears, a silver collar, and such bright, kind eyes. May was not a bit afraid of him, but loved him at once, and named him Floss. He was so soft and silky. Pussy liked him too, and when May was sleepy, they both snuggled down in the same basket like 2 good babies, and went to Bijlo.
"Well, I never! What shall we find next?"
said Nurse when she saw the dog in the morning.
"Perhaps it will be an elephant to fill the whole house and scare you out of your wits,"
laughed May, dancing about with Snowdrop chasing her bare toes, while Floss shook and growled over her shoes as if they were rats.
"If your cousin John wants to give you any more animals, I wish he'd send a pony to take you to school and save my old legs the pain of trotting after you,"
said Nurse, for May did have a rich cousin who was very fond of her and often gave her nice things.
"Perhaps he will."
May laughed, much tickled with the idea that it was a fairy and not cousin John who sent the cunning little creatures to her. But she didn't get the pony that night, for in the afternoon her mother told her not to sit on the lawn, because it was damp, and May did not mind being busy with a nice story. So when she took up her box, a loud sneeze seemed to blow the lid off, and all she saw was a bit of red flannel.
"What is this for?"
she asked, much disappointed, and as if to answer, the strip of flannel wrapped itself around her neck.
"There, my throat is sore, and I am hoarse. I wonder how that fairy knew I sat on the damp grass. I'm so sorry, for I did want a pony, and I might have had it if I'd only minded,"
said May, angry with herself for spoiling all her fun. It was spoiled, for she had such a cold. Next day she couldn't go out at all, but had to take medicine and keep by the fire, while the other children had a lovely picnic.
"I won't wish for anything tonight. I don't deserve a present. I was so disobedient, but I have tried to be patient,"
said May, feeling for the box. The fairy had not forgotten her, and there was a beautiful picture book full of new, nice stories printed in colored ink.
"How splendid to read tomorrow while I'm shut up,"
she said, and went to sleep very happily. All the next day she enjoyed the pretty pictures and funny tales, and never complained or fretted at all, but was so much better. The doctor said she could go out tomorrow if it was fine.
"Now I will wish for the pony,"
said May in her bed, but there was nothing in the box except a little red silk robe like a halter. She did not know what to do with it that night, but she did the next morning, for just as she dressed, her brother called from the garden.
"May, look out and see what we found in the stable. None of us can catch him, so do come and see if you can. Your name is on the card tied to his mane."
May looked, and there was a snow-white pony racing about the yard, as if he was having a fine frolic. Then she knew the halter was for him, and ran down to catch him. The minute she appeared, the pony went to her and put his nose in her hand, neighing as if he said,
"This is my little mistress. I will mind her and serve her well."
May was delighted and very proud when the pony let her put on the saddle and bridle that lay in the barn, all ready to use. She jumped up and rode gaily down the road. Aunt Will, Aunt Mamma, and all the maids, and Floss and Snowdrop ran to see the pretty sight. The children at school were much excited when she came trotting up, and all wanted to ride Prince. He was very gentle, and everyone had a ride, but May had the best fun, for she could go every day for long trots by the carriage when Mamma and Will drove out. A blue habit and a hat with a long feather were bought that afternoon, and May was so happy and content at night that she said to herself as she lay in bed,
"I'll wish for something for Will now and see if I get it. I don't want any more presents yet. I've had my share, and I'd love to give away to other people who have no fairy box."
So she wished for a nice boat, and in the box lay a key with the name Water Lily on it. She guessed what it meant, and in the morning told her brother to come to the river and see what she had for him. There lay a pretty green and white boat with cushioned seat and a sail all spread, and at the masthead a little flag flying in the wind with the words Water Lily on it in gold letters. Will was so surprised and pleased to find that it was his, he turned heels over head on the grass and kissed May, and skipped into his boat, crying,
"All aboard!"
as if eager to try it at once. May followed, and they sailed away down the lovely river, white with real lilies, while the blackbird sang in the green meadows on either side, and boys and girls stopped on the bridges to see them pass. After that, May kept on trying to be good and wishing for things for herself and other people, till she forgot how to be naughty, and was the sweetest little girl in the world. Then there was no need for fairies to help her, and one night the box was not under the pillow.
"Well, I've had my share of pretty things and must learn to do without. I'm glad I tried, for now it is easy to be good, and I don't need to be rewarded,"
said May as she fell asleep, quite happy and contented, though she did wish she could have seen the fairy just once. Next morning the first thing she saw was a beautiful bracelet shining on the table, and while she stood admiring it, she heard the little voice sing,
"Here is a bracelet for good little May to wear on her arm by night and by day. When it shines like the sun, all's going well. But when you are bad, a sharp prick will tell. Farewell, little girl, for now we must part. Make a fairy box, dear, of your own happy heart, and take out for all sweet gifts every day, till all the year round is like beautiful May.
As the last words were sung, right before her eyes, she saw a tiny creature swinging on the rose that stood there in a vase, a lovely elf with wings like a butterfly, a gauzy dress and a star on her forehead. She smiled and waved her hand as she slowly rose and fluttered away into the sunshine till she vanished from sight, leaving May with a magic bracelet on her arm and the happy thought that at last she had really seen a fairy. End of the Fairy Box by Louisa May Alcott. The Horse That Went to Church by Jean McIntosh. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Maggie and May had a dear old horse, which was a great pet, and his name was Bobby. Now Bobby was very, very wise, and if I were to tell you all the funny things he did, why I should fill this book, so that there would not be room for anything else. Of course, these two little girls lived in the country, for boys and girls who live in towns very seldom have a horse to play with. It was harvest time, and the reapers were very busy cutting down the golden corn and binding it into sheaves. Have you ever been in a harvest field on a summer afternoon? I can tell you it is delightful, and those of you who have not been there have missed something very nice indeed. Now every afternoon there was great running to and fro in the farm kitchen, for Molly the cook was putting into a basket tea and bread and butter and scones and all sort of good things for Maggie and May to take to the workers in the harvest field. At 4 o'clock the stable boy opened the stable door, and out trotted Bobby, saddled, for he too was going to the harvest field. Maggie would ride upon his back, and May would carry the basket, and when the workers saw them coming, they would all sit down in a corner of the field waiting to have tea. Bobby knew the road to the field quite well, but sad to say, he was very lazy and would not hurry at all. Then Maggie would drive him close to the hedge and pretend she was getting a stick to whip him with. When she did this, he began to trot and never stopped until he came to the gate in the field. When tea was over and all the things were gathered into the basket again, these two little girls would both get on Bobby's back, one behind the other, and he galloped off, for he was thinking to himself, now I'm going back to my stable and to a good feed of hay. When all the corn was gathered in and sent away to be made into flour, Maggie and May went back to school. Bobby went with them every day, for it was too far away for little girls to walk. They would both jump upon his back, and with a "Gee up, Bobby!" off he trot. Every Sunday Bobby went to church. I do not mean he went into church, for I am afraid the seat would not have held him, and he would have looked rather funny. As soon as the first bell rang, the stable boy harnessed him to the trap, and round trotted Bobby to the door of the house. When the second bell began to ring, Maggie and May got into the dog cart and drove off to the church. When they got there, Bobby was put into a stable not far away until the service was over. Now one Sunday morning these two little girls could not go to church, so that Bobby was not harnessed as usual. When the first bell began to ring, Maggie said to May, "Listen, May, I think I hear Bobby crying for us. Let us look out of the window." There, with his head looking over the stable door, was Bobby, whinging as loudly as he could. "Look, look!" cried May. "He's trying to get out." Just then Bobby gave a great jump over the door and was trotting off to church. He went straight to his stall in the stable and remained there until the service was over. and when the other horses backed out, Bobby did the same and came home, no doubt feeling that he had done his duty. End of The Horse That Went to Church by Jean McIntosh, read by Telly Tiger.
How the Camel Got His Hump by Rudyard Kipling. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Now this is the next tale, and it tells how the camel got his big hump. In the beginning of years, when the world was so new and all, and the animals were just beginning to work for man, there was a camel, and he lived in the middle of a howling desert because he did not want to work. And besides, he was a howler himself. So he ate sticks and thorns and tamarisks and milkweed and prickles, most excruciating idle. And when anybody spoke to him, he said, "Humph," just humph, and no more. Presently the horse came to him on Monday morning, with a saddle on his back and a bit in his mouth, and said, "Camel, oh camel, come out and trot like the rest of us." "Humph," said the camel, and the horse went away and told the man. Presently the dog came to him with a stick in his mouth and said, "Camel, oh camel, come and fetch and carry like the rest of us." "Humph," said the camel, and the dog went away and told the man. Presently the ox came to him with the yoke on his neck and said, "Camel, oh camel, come and plough like the rest of us." "Humph," said the camel, and the ox went away and told the man. At the end of the day, the man called the horse and the dog and the ox together and said, "Three, oh three, I am very sorry for you, with the world so new and all, but that hump thing in the desert can't work, or he would have been here by now. So I am going to leave him alone, and you must work double time to make up for it." That made the three very angry, with the world so new and all, and they held a palaver and an indaba and a punchayet and a powwow on the edge of the desert, and the camel came chewing on milkweed, most excruciating idle, and laughed at them. Then he said, "Humph," and went away again. Presently there came along the Jinn in charge of all deserts, rolling in a cloud of dust. Jinns always travel that way because it is magic. And he stopped to palaver and powwow with the three. "Jinn of all deserts," said the horse, "is it right for anyone to be idle, with the world so new and all?" "Certainly not," said the Jinn. "Well," said the horse, "there's a thing in the middle of your howling desert, and he's a howler himself, with a long neck and long legs, and he hasn't done a stroke of work since Monday morning. He won't trot." "Whew," said the Jinn, whistling. "That's my camel for all the gold in Arabia. What does he say about it?" "He says, 'Humph,'" said the dog, "and he won't fetch and carry." "Does he say anything else?" "Only 'Humph,' and he won't plough," said the ox. "Very good," said the Jinn. "I'll humph him if you will kindly wait a minute." The Jinn rolled himself up in his dust cloak and took a bearing across the desert, and found the camel most excruciatingly idle, looking at his own reflection in a pool of water. "My long and bubbling friend," said the Jinn, "what's this I hear of your doing no work, with the world so new and all?" "Humph," said the camel. The Jinn sat down with his chin in his hand and began to think a great magic, while the camel looked at his own reflection in the pool of water. "You've given the three extra work since Monday morning, all on account of your excruciating idleness," said the Jinn, and he went on thinking magics with his chin in his hand. "Humph," said the camel. I shouldn't say that again if I were you, said the Djinn. You might say it once too often. Bubbles, I want you to work. And the camel said, Humph, again. But no sooner had he said it than he saw his back that he was so proud of, puffing up into a great, big, lolloping humph. Did you see that? Said the Djinn. That is your very own humph, that you've brought upon your very own self by not working. Today is Thursday, and you've done no work since Monday when the work began. Now you are going to work. How can I, said the camel, with this humph on my back? That's made a purpose, said the Djinn. All because you missed those 3 days. You will be able to work now for 3 days without eating, because you can live on your humph. And don't you ever say I never did anything for you. Come out of the desert and go to the 3 and behave. Humph yourself. And the camel humphed himself, humph and all, and went away to join the 3. And from that day to this, the camel always wears a humph. We call it a hump now, not to hurt his feelings. But he has never yet caught up with the 3 days that he missed at the beginning of the world, and he has never yet learned how to behave. The camel's hump is an ugly lump, which well you may see at the zoo, but uglier yet is the hump that we get from having too little to do. Kiddies and grown-ups, too, if we haven't enough to do, we get the hump, Camellia's hump, the hump that is black and blue. We climb out of bed with a frowsly head and a snarly, yarly voice. We shiver and scowl and we grunt and we growl at our bath and our boots and our toys. And there ought to be a corner for me, and I know there is one for you, when we get the hump, Camellia's hump, the hump that is black and blue. The cure for this ill is not to sit still, or frowst with a book by the fire, but to take a large hoe and shovel also, and dig till you gently perspire. And then you will find that the sun and the wind and the Djinn of the garden too have lifted the hump, the horrible hump, the hump that is black and blue. I get it as well as you, if I haven't enough to do, we all get the hump, Camellia's hump, kiddies and grown-ups too. End of How the Camel Got His Hump by Rudyard Kipling. Read by Natalie Doctor. How the Whale Got His Throat by Rudyard Kipling. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. In the sea, once upon a time, O my best beloved, there was a whale, and he ate fishes. He ate the starfish and the garfish, and the crab and the dab, and the plaice and the dace, and the skate and his mate, and the mackerel and the pickerel, and the really truly twirly whirly eel. All the fishes he could find in all the sea he ate with his mouth, so, till at last there was only one small fish left in all the sea, and he was a small 'stute fish, and he swam a little behind the whale's right ear, so as to be out of harm's way. Then the whale stood up on his tail and said, "I'm hungry." And the small 'stute fish said in a small 'stute voice, "Noble and generous Cetacean, have you ever tasted man?" "No," said the whale. "What is it like?" "Nice," said the small 'stute fish. "Nice, but nubbly." "Then fetch me some," said the whale, and he made the sea froth up with his tail. "One at a time is enough," said the 'stute fish. "If you swim to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, that is magic, you will find, sitting on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing on but a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must not forget the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, one shipwrecked mariner, who, it is only fair to tell you, is a man of infinite resource and sagacity. So the whale swam and swam to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, as fast as he could swim, and on a raft, in the middle of the sea, with nothing to wear except a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must particularly remember the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, he found one single solitary shipwrecked mariner, trailing his toes in the water. He had his mummy's leave to paddle, or else he would never have done it, because he was a man of infinite resource and sagacity. Then the whale opened his mouth back and back and back, till it nearly touched his tail, and he swallowed the shipwrecked mariner, and the raft he was sitting on, and his blue canvas breeches, and the suspenders, which you must not forget, and the jackknife. He swallowed them all down into his warm, dark inside cupboards, and then he smacked his lips, so, and turned round 3 times on his tail. But as soon as the mariner, who was a man of infinite resource and sagacity, found himself truly inside the whale's warm, dark inside cupboards, he stumped and he jumped, and he thumped and he bumped, and he pranced and he danced, and he banged and he clanged, and he hit and he bit, and he leaped and he creeped, and he prowled and he howled, and he hopped and he dropped, and he cried and he sighed, and he crawled and he bawled, and he stepped and he leapt, and he danced hornpipes where he shouldn't, and the whale felt most unhappy indeed. Have you forgotten the suspenders? So he said to the 'stute fish, "This man is very nubbly, and besides, he is making me hiccough. What shall I do?" "Tell him to come out," said the 'stute fish. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner, "Come out and behave yourself. I've got the hiccoughs." "Nay, nay," said the mariner, "not so, but far otherwise. Take me to my natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and I'll think about it." And he began to dance more than ever. "You had better take him home," said the 'stute fish to the whale. "I ought to have warned you that he is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam and swam, with both flippers and his tail, as hard as he could for the hiccoughs, and at last he saw the mariner's natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and he rushed halfway up the beach, and opened his mouth wide and wide and wide, and said, "Change here for Winchester, Ashalot, Nashua, Keene, and stations on the Fitchburg road." And just as he said Fitch, the mariner walked out of his mouth. But while the whale had been swimming, the mariner, who was indeed a person of infinite resource and sagacity, had taken his jackknife and cut up the raft into a little square grating, all running crisscross, and he had tied it firm with his suspenders. Now you know why you were not to forget the suspenders. And he dragged that grating good and tight into the whale's throat, and there it stuck. Then he recited the following sloka, which, as you have not heard it, I will now proceed to relate. "By means of a grating, I have stopped your aiding." For the mariner, he was also a Hibernian, and he stepped out on the shingle and went home to his mother, who had given him leave to trail his toes in the water, and he married and lived happily ever afterward. So did the whale, but from that day on, the grating in his throat, which he could neither cough up nor swallow down, prevented him eating anything except very, very small fish, and that is the reason why whales nowadays never eat men or boys or little girls. The small 'stute fish went and hid himself in the mud under the door sills of the equator. He was afraid that the whale might be angry with him. The sailor took the jackknife home. He was wearing the blue canvas breeches when he walked out on the shingle. The suspenders were left behind, you see, to tie the grating with. And that is the end of that tale. When the cabin portholes are dark and green because of the seas outside, when the ship goes whop with a wiggle between, and the steward falls into the soup tureen, and the trunks begin to slide, when Nursey lies on the floor in a heap, and Mummy tells you to let her sleep, and you aren't waked or washed or dressed, why then you will know, if you haven't guessed, you're 50 north and 40 west. End of How the Whale Got His Throat by Rudyard Kipling. Read by Natalie Doctor.
On the Way to the Sun by Mrs. W. K. Clifford. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. He had journeyed a long way and was very tired. It seemed like a dream when he stood up after a sleep in the field and looked over the wall and saw the garden and the flowers and the children playing all about. He looked at the long road behind him, at the dark wood and the barren hills. It was the world to which he belonged. He looked at the garden before him, at the big house and the terrace, and the steps that led down to the smooth lawn. It was the world which belonged to the children. "Poor boy," said the elder child, "I will get you something to eat." "But where did he come from?" the gardener asked. "We do not know," the child answered, "but he is very hungry, and mother says we may give him some food." "I will take him some milk," said the little one. In one hand she carried a mug, and with the other she pulled along her little broken cart. "But what is he called?" asked the gardener. "We do not know," the little one answered, "but he is very thirsty, and mother says we may give him some milk." "Where is he going?" asked the gardener. "We do not know," the children said, "but he is very tired." When the boy had rested well, he got up saying, "I must not stay any longer," and turned to go on his way. "What have you to do?" the children asked. "I am one of the crew and must help to make the world go round," he answered. "Why do we not help too?" "You are the passengers." "How far have you to go?" they asked. "Oh, a long way," he answered, "on and on until I can touch the sun." "Will you really touch it?" they said, awestruck. "I dare say I shall tire long before I get there," he answered sadly. "Perhaps without knowing it, though, I shall reach it in my sleep," he added. But they hardly heard the last words, for he was already far off. "Why did you talk to him?" the gardener said. "He is just a working boy." "And we do nothing. It was very good of him to notice us," they said humbly. "Good," said the gardener in despair. "Why, between you and him there is a great difference." "There was only a wall," they answered. "Who set it up?" they asked curiously. "Why, the builders, of course. Men set it up." "And who will pull it down?" "It will not want any pulling down," the man answered grimly. "Time will do that." As the children went back to their play, they looked up at the light towards which the boy was journeying. "Perhaps we too shall reach it some day," they said. End of On the Way to the Sun by Mrs. W. K. Clifford. Read by Joanna Schreck.
The Piggy Girl by Louisa May Alcott. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. The Piggy Girl. "I won't be washed, I won't be washed," screamed little Betty, kicking and slapping the maid who undressed her one night. "You better go and live with the pigs, dirty child," said Maria, scrubbing away at two very grubby hands. "I wish I could. I love to be dirty. I will be dirty," roared Betty, throwing the sponge out of the window and the soap under the table. Maria could do nothing with her, so she bundled her into bed, half wiped, telling her to go to sleep right away. "I won't. I'll go and live with Miss Gleason's pigs, and have nothing to do but eat and sleep and roll in the dirt, and never, never be washed any more, said Betty to herself. She lay thinking about it and blinking at the moon for a while. Then she got up very softly and crept down the back stairs through the garden to the sty, where two nice little pigs were fast asleep among the straw in their small house. They only grunted when Betty crept into a corner, laughing at the fun it would be to play piggy and live here, with no Maria to wash her and no careful mamma to keep saying, "Put on a clean apron, dear." Next morning she was waked up by hearing Mrs. Gleason pour milk into the trough. She lay very still till the woman was gone. Then she crept out and drank all she wanted and took the best bit of cold potato and bread for her breakfast, and the lazy pigs did not get up till she was done. While they ate and rooted in the dirt, Betty slept as long as she liked, with no school, no errands, no patchwork to do. She liked it and kept hidden till night. Then she went home and opened a little window in the store closet and got in and took as many good things to eat and carry away as she liked. She had a fine walk in her nightgown and saw the flowers asleep, heard the little birds chirp in the nest, and watched the fireflies and moths in their pretty play. No one saw her but the cats, and they played with her and hopped at her toes in the moonlight and had great fun. When she was tired, she went to sleep with the pigs and dozed all the next day, only coming out to eat and drink when the milk was brought, and the cold bits, for Mrs. Gleason took good care of her pigs and gave them clean straw often and kept them as nice as she could. Betty lived in this queer way a long time and soon looked more like a pig than a little girl, for her nightgown got dirty, her hair was never combed, her face was never washed, and she loved to dig in the mud till her hands looked like paws. She never talked, but began to grunt as the pigs did, and burrowed into the straw to sleep, and squealed when they crowded her and quarreled over the food, eating with her nose in the trough like a real pig. At first she used to play about at night and steal things to eat, and people set traps to catch the thief in their gardens, and the cook in her own house scolded about the rats that carried off the cakes and pies out of her pantry. But by and by she got too lazy and fat to care for anything but sleeping and eating, and never left the sty. She went on her hands and knees now, and began to wonder if a little tail wouldn't grow, and her nose changed to a snout. All summer she played be a pig, and thought it good fun, but when the autumn came it was cold, and she longed for her nice warm flannel nightgown, and got tired of cold victuals, and began to wish she had a fire to sit by, and good buckwheat cakes to eat. She was ashamed to go home, and wondered what she should do after this silly frolic. She asked the pig how they managed in winter, but they only grunted, and she could not remember what became of them, for the sty was always empty in cold weather. One dreadful night she found out. She was snuggled down between the great fat piggies to keep warm, but her toes were cold, and she was trying to pull the straw over them, when she heard Mr. Gleason say to his boy, "We must kill these pigs tomorrow. They are fat enough, so come and help me sharpen the big knife." "Oh dear, what will become of me?" thought Betty, as she heard the grindstone go round and round as the knife got sharper and sharper. "I look so like a pig, they will kill me too and make me into sausages if I don't run away. I am tired of playing piggy, and I'd rather be washed 100 times a day than be put in a pork barrel." So she lay trembling till morning. Then she ran through the garden and found the back door open. It was very early, and no one saw her, for the cook was in the shed getting wood to make her fire. So Betty slipped upstairs to the nursery and was going to whisk into bed when she saw in the glass an ugly black creature, all rags and dirt, with rumpled hair and a little round nose covered with mud. "Can it be me?" she said. "How horrid I am!" And she could not spoil her nice white bed, but hopped into the bathtub and had a good scrubbing. Next she got a clean nightgown and brushed her hair, and cut her long nails, and looked like a tidy little girl again. Then she lay down in her cozy crib with the pink cover and the lacy curtains, and fell fast asleep, glad to have clean sheets, soft blankets, and her own little pillow once more. "Come, darling, wake up and see the new frock I've got for you, and the nice ruffled apron. It's Thanksgiving Day, and all the cousins are coming for dinner," said her mamma, with a soft kiss on the rosy cheek. Betty started up screaming. "Don't kill me! Oh, please don't! I'm not truly pig. I'm a little girl, and if you let me run home, I'll never fret when I'm washed again." "What is the dear child afraid of?" said mamma, cuddling her close and laughing to see Betty stare wildly about for the fat pigs and the stuffy sty. She told her mum all about the queer time she had had, and was much surprised to hear mamma say, "It was all a dream, dear. You have been safely asleep in your little bed ever since you slept poor Maria last night. Well, I am glad I dreamed it, for it makes me love to be clean. Come, Maria, soap and scrub me as much as you like. I won't kick and scream ever any more," cried Betty, skipping about, glad to be safe in a pleasant home and no longer a dirty, lazy pig. End of The Piggy Girl by Louisa May Alcott, read by Telly Tiger.
The Sandy Cat by Mrs. W.K. Clifford. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. The Sandy Cat sat by the kitchen fire. Yesterday it had had no supper. This morning everyone had forgotten it. All night it had caught no mice. All day as yet it had tasted no milk. A little gray mouse, a saucer full of milk, a few fish or chicken bones would have satisfied it. But no gray mouse with its soft stringy tail behind it ran across the floor. No milk was near, no chicken bones, no fish, no anything. The serving maid had been washing clothes and was hanging them out to dry. The children had loitered on their way to school and were wondering what the master would say to them. The father had gone to the fair to help a neighbor choose a horse. The mother sat making a patchwork quilt. No one thought of the Sandy Cat. It sat by the fire alone and hungry. At last the clothes were all a-drying. The children had been scolded and sat learning a lesson for the morrow. The father came from the fair and the patchwork quilt was put away. The serving maid put on a white apron with a frill and a clean cap. Then taking the Sandy Cat in her arms, said, "Pussy, shall we go to the garden?" So they went and walked up and down the pathway, till they stopped before a rose tree. The serving maid held up the cat to smell the roses, but with one long bound it leaped from her arms, and away, away, away. Whither? Ah, dear children, I cannot tell, for I was not there to see. But if ever you are a Sandy Cat, you will know that it is a terrible thing to be asked to smell roses when you are longing for a saucer full of milk and a gray mouse with a soft, stringy tail. End of The Sandy Cat by Mrs. W.K. Clifford.
The Bad Girl by Mrs. W.K. Clifford. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. She was always called the Bad Girl, for she had once, when she was very little, put out her tongue at the postman. She lived alone with her grandmother and her 3 brothers in the cottage beyond the field, and the girls in the village took no notice of her. The Bad Girl did not mind this, for she was always thinking of the cuckoo clock. The clock stood in one corner of the cottage, and every hour a door opened at the top of its face and a little cuckoo came out and called its name just the same number of times that the clock ought to have struck, and called it so loudly and in so much haste that the clock was afraid to strike at all. The bad girl was always wondering whether it was worse for the clock to have a cupboard in its forehead, and the bird that was always hopping in and out, or for the poor cuckoo to spend so much time in a dark little prison. If it could only get away to the woods, she said to herself, who knows but its voice might grow sweet, and even life itself might come to it. She thought of the clock so much that her grandmother used to say, "Ah, lassie, if you would only think of me sometimes." But the bad girl would answer, "You are not in prison, dear Granny, and you have not even a bee in your bonnet, let alone a bird in your head. Why should I think of you?" One day, close by the farm, she saw the big girls from school gathering flowers. "Give me one," she said. "Perhaps the cuckoo would like it." But they all cried, "No, no," and tried to frighten her away. "They are for the little one's birthday. Tomorrow she will be 7 years old," they said, "and she is to have a crown of flowers and a cake, and all the afternoon we shall play merry games with her." "Is she unhappy that you are taking so much trouble for her?" asked the bad girl. "Oh no, she is very happy, but it will be her birthday and we want to make her happier." "Why?" "Because we love her," said one. "Because she is so little," said another. "Because she is alive," said a third. "Are all things that live to be loved and cared for?" the bad girl asked, and they were too busy to listen, so she went on her way thinking, and it seemed as if all things round, the birds and bees, and the rustling leaves and the tender wildflowers, half hidden in the grass, answered as she went along. Yes, they are all to be cared for and made happier, if it be possible. The cuckoo clock is not alive, she thought. Oh, no, it is not alive, the trees answered. But many things that do not live have voices, and many others are just signposts, pointing the way. The way to what and where? We find out for ourselves. We must all find out for ourselves, the trees sighed and whispered to each other. As the bad girl entered the cottage, the cuckoo called out its name 11 times, but she did not even look up. She walked straight across to the chair by the fireside, and kneeling down, kissed her granny's hands. End of The Bad Girl by Mrs. W. K. Clifford. Read by Joanna Schreck. Poor Little Doll, from Very Short Stories and Verses for Children, by Mrs. W. K. Clifford. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It was a plain little doll that had been bought for 6 pence at a stall in the marketplace. It had scanty hair and a weak composition face, a calico body, and foolish feet that always turned inwards instead of outwards, and from which the sawdust now and then oozed. Yet in its glass eyes there was an expression of amusement. They seemed to be looking not at you, but through you, and the pursed-up red lips were always smiling at what the glass eyes saw. "Well, you are a doll," the boy said, looking up from his French exercise. "And what are you staring at me for? Is there anything behind?" he asked, looking over his shoulder. The doll made no answer. "And whatever are you smiling for?" he asked. "I believe you are always smiling. I believe you'd go on if I didn't do my exercise till next year, or if the cat died, or the monument tumbled down." But still the doll smiled in silence, and the boy went on with his exercise. Presently he looked up again and yawned. "I think I'll go for a stroll," he said, and put his book by. "I know what I'll do," he said suddenly. "I'll take that doll and hang it up to the apple tree to scare away the sparrows." And calling out, "Sis, I've taken your doll. I'm going to make a scarecrow of it," and went off to the garden. His sister rushed after him, crying out, "Oh, my poor doll! Oh, my dear little doll, what are you doing to it, you naughty boy?" "It's so ugly," he said. "No, it's not ugly," she cried. "And it's so stupid. It never does anything but smile. It can't even grow. It never gets any bigger." "Poor darling doll," Sis said, as she got it once more safely into her arms. "Of course you can't grow, but it is not your fault. They did not make any tucks in you to let out. And it's so unfeeling. It went smiling away like anything when I could not do my French. It has no heart. Of course it can't feel. Why hasn't it got a heart? Because it isn't alive. You ought to be sorry for it and very, very kind to it, poor thing. Well, what is it always smiling for? Because it is so good, answered Sis, bursting into tears. It is never bad-tempered, it never complains, and it never did anything unkind. And kissing it tenderly, you are always good and sweet, she said, and always look smiling, though you must be very unhappy at not being alive. End of Poor Little Doll, from Very Short Stories and Verses for Children, by Mrs. W. K. Clifford. Read by Joanna Schreck.
Uncle Wiggily's Toothache, by Howard R. Garris. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Uncle Wiggily's Toothache. Once upon a time there was a boy who had the toothache. It was not a very large tooth that pained him, and really it was quite surprising how such a very large ache got into such a small tooth. At least, that is what the boy thought. "But I'm not going to the dentist and let him pull it," cried the boy, holding his hand over his mouth. "And I'm not going to let anybody in this house pull it either, so there." He ran and hid himself in a corner. Girls aren't that way when they have the toothache, only boys. "Perhaps the tooth will not need pulling," said Mother, as she looked at the boy and saw how much pain he had. "That's so," exclaimed Grandma, who was trying to think of some way in which to help the boy. "Maybe the dentist can make a little hole in your tooth, Sonny, and fill the hole with cement, as the man filled the hole in our sidewalk, and then all your pains will stop." "No, I'm not going to the dentist. I am not going, I tell you," cried Sonny. And I think he stamped his foot on the floor the least little bit. It may have been that he saw a tack sticking up and wanted to hammer it down with his shoe, but I am afraid it was a stamp of his foot, and afterward the boy was sorry. But anyhow, his tooth kept on aching, and it was the kind called jumping, for it was worse at one time than another. Sometimes the boy thought the pain jumped from one side of his tongue to the other side, and again it seemed that it leapt away up to the roof of his mouth. The toothache even seemed to turn somersaults and peppersaults, and once it appeared to jump over backward, but it never completely jumped away, which is what the boy wished it would do. "You'd better let me take you to the dentist's," said his mother. "He'll either fix the tooth so it won't ache any more, or he'll take it out so a new tooth will grow in. And really, the pain the dentist may cause will only be a little one, and it will be all over in a moment, while your tooth may ache all night." "No, I'm not going to the dentist. I'm not going," cried Sonny Boy. And then again he acted just as if there were a tack in the carpet that needed hammering down with his foot. Now it was about this time that Uncle Wiggily Longears, the bunny rabbit gentleman, was hopping from his hollow stump bungalow in the woods to go look for an adventure. But as yet Uncle Wiggily knew nothing about the boy with the toothache. That came a little later. "Are you going to be gone long?" asked Nurse Jane Fuzzy Wuzzy, the muskrat lady housekeeper of the bunny gentleman. "Only just long enough to have a nice adventure," answered Mr. Longears, and away he hopped on his red, white, and blue striped rheumatism crutch, with his pink, twinkling nose held in front of him like the headlight on a choo-choo train. Now, As it happened, Uncle Wiggily's hollow stump bungalow was not far from the house where the toothache boy lived, though the boy had never seen the rabbit's home. He had often wandered in the woods almost in front of the bunny's bungalow, but, not having the proper sort of eyes, the boy had never seen Uncle Wiggily. It needs very sharp eyes to see the creatures of the woods and fields, and to find the little houses in which they live. At any rate, the boy had never noticed Uncle Wiggily, though the bunny gentleman had often seen the boy. Many a time when you go through the woods, the animal folk look out and see you, when you never even know they are there. And pretty soon Uncle Wiggily hopped right past the house where the toothache boy lived, and just then, for about the 10th time, Mother was saying, "You had better let me take you to the dentist and have the toothache stopped, Sonny." "No, no, I don't want to. I guess it will stop itself," said the boy, hopeful-like. Uncle Wiggily, hiding in the bushes in front of the boy's house, sat up on his hind legs and twinkled his pink nose. By a strange and wonderful new power which he had, the bunny gentleman could hear and understand boy and girl talk, though he could not speak it himself. So it was no trouble at all for Uncle Wiggily to know what the boy was saying. "He's afraid, that's what the boy is," said the bunny uncle to himself, leaning on his red, white, and blue striped crutch. "He's afraid to go to the dentist and have the tooth filled or pulled. Now that's very silly of him, for the dentist will not hurt him much, and will soon stop the ache. I wonder how I can make that boy believe this. His mother and grandmother can't seem to." For Mr. Longears heard Mother and Grandma trying to get the toothache boy to let them take him to the dentist, but the boy only shook his head and made believe hammer tacks into the carpet with his foot, and he held his hand over his mouth. But all the while the ache kept aching achier and jumping, leaping, tumbling, twisting, turning, and flip-flopping, almost like a clown in the circus. "No, no, I'm not going to the dentist," cried the boy. Then Uncle Wiggily had an idea. He could look in through the window of the house and see the boy. In front of the window was a grassy place near the edge of the wood, and close by was an old stump, shaped almost like the easy chair in a dentist office. "I know what I'll do," said Uncle Wiggily. "I'll make believe I have the toothache. I'll go get Dr. Possum, and I'll sit down in this stump chair. Then I'll tell Dr. Possum to make believe pull out one of my teeth. I suppose if Nurse Jane were here, she might ask what good that would do," thought Uncle Wiggily. "But I think it will do a lot of good if that boy sees me, a rabbit gentleman, having a tooth pulled out, which is what he will think he sees. It may make him brave enough to go to the dentist. I'll try it." Away hopped Uncle Wiggily to Dr. Possum's office. "What's the matter? Rheumatism again?" asked the animal doctor. "No, but I want you to come over and pull a tooth for me," said Uncle Wiggily, blinking one eye and twinkling his pink nose surreptitious-like. "Pull a tooth? Why, your teeth are all right," cried Dr. Possum. "It's to give a little lesson to a boy," whispered the bunny. And then Dr. Possum blinked one eye in understanding fashion. A little later Uncle Wiggily sat himself down on the old stump that looked like a chair, and Dr. Possum stood over him. "Open your mouth and show me which tooth it is that hurts," said Dr. Possum, just like a dentist. "All right," answered Uncle Wiggily, and from the corner of his left eye the bunny gentleman could see the toothache boy at the window looking out. The boy saw the rabbit and Dr. Possum at the old stump, and he saw Mr. Longears open his mouth and point with his paw to a tooth. "Oh, mother!" cried the boy, very much excited. "Look, there's a funny rabbit all dressed up in a tall silk hat, having a tooth pulled. Grandma, look!" "Well, I do declare," murmured the old lady. "Isn't that perfectly wonderful? I didn't know that animals ever had the toothache."
"Oh, I suppose they do once in a while," said the toothache boy's mother. "But see how brave that rabbit gentleman is, not to mind having the animal dentist stop his ache. Just fancy!"
Neither Grandma nor Mother said anything to Sonny Boy. All three of them just stood at the window and watched Uncle Wiggily and Dr. Possum, and, as they looked, Dr. Possum put a little shiny thing like a button hook in the bunny gentleman's mouth. He gave a sudden little pull, and a moment later held up something which sparkled in the sun. It was only a bit of glass, which Uncle Wiggily had held in his paw ready for this part in the little play, but it looked like a tooth.
"Well, I declare," laughed Grandma. "The bunny had his tooth pulled." "And he doesn't seem to mind it at all," added Mother.
Surely enough, Uncle Wiggily hopped off the make-believe dentist stump, and with his red, white, and blue striped rheumatism crutch, began to dance a little jiggity-jig with Dr. Possum.
"This dance is to show that it doesn't hurt even to have a tooth pulled, much less to have one filled," said the bunny. "I understand," laughed Dr. Possum.
And as he and Uncle Wiggily danced, they looked out of the corners of their eyes and saw the toothache boy standing at the window watching them.
"Well, I never in all my born days saw a sight like that!" exclaimed Grandma.
"Nor I," said Mother. "Isn't it wonderful?" Sonny Boy took his hand down from his mouth. I guess, Mother," he said, as he saw Uncle Wiggily jump over his crutch in a most happy fashion, "I guess I'll go to the dentist and have him stop my toothache."
"Hooray!"
softly cried Uncle Wiggily, who heard what the boy said.
"This is just what I wanted to happen, Dr. Possum. Our little lesson is over. Now we may go."
Away hopped the bunny to tell Nurse Jane about the strange adventure, and Dr. Possum, with his bag of powders and pills on his tail, where he always carried it, shuffled back to his office. Sonny Boy went to the dentist, and soon his tooth was fixed so it would not ache again. He hardly felt at all what the dentist did to him.
I didn't know how easy it was till I saw the rabbit have his tooth pulled,"
said the boy to the dentist.
Said the dentist, non-committal like. "Some rabbits are very funny."
And if the puppy dog doesn't waggle his tail so hard that he knocks over the milk bottle when it's trying to slide down the doormat, I shall have the pleasure next of telling you the story of Uncle Wiggily and the Freckled Girl. End of Uncle Wiggily's Toothache.
Legend of the Violet by Frances Jenkins Olcott. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Legend of the Violet, Iroquois. Many moons before the white man came to the land of the Red Indian, there lived a young warrior who was the pride of his tribe, for dangerous deeds had he accomplished for the good of his people. He had slain the great heron that destroyed their children, and he had brought back from the mountain of the witches the healing roots that cured the plague. Once, when he led a band of warriors against another tribe, he saw in the lodge of one of his enemies a maiden so gentle and lovely that he longed to have her for his wigwam. But because of the strife between the two tribes, he could not buy her with quills of the wampum bird. So after he had returned victorious with his warriors to his own village, he often thought of the maiden, and how, unless he could light his wigwam with the brightness of her eyes, he would no longer lead out his young men to battle. At last he went forth alone, and hid in the woods near the village of his enemies. There he watched patiently for the maiden whose eyes had softened his heart. He sang her praises so often that the little birds took up his song and carried it in their flight over valley and meadow. The bear, the fox, and the beaver heard him murmur her name in his sleep, and thought that a bright new flower had been born in the woodland. With the calls of the songbirds he wooed the maiden from her lodge, and lifting her, bore her away toward the hunting grounds of his people. But alas, a suitor of the maiden saw her carried swiftly off upon the shoulder of the dreaded warrior. He dared not follow, but fled to the village and gave the alarm. The braves left him, a coward, in the hands of the women, and hastened in pursuit of the maiden and her lover. They followed them over mountains and plains all through the dark night, and as the morning dawned they found them in the forest. And when the braves saw the maiden, they were filled with anger, for she had plaited her hair about the neck of the young man to show that she was a willing captive and had given him her heart. Then her people, enraged at their foe for his daring, and at the maiden because she had deserted her tribe, killed them both and left their bodies lying where they fell. And from this spot in the forest sprang up the first blue violets, and the winds and the birds carried the seeds of the flowers and scattered them all over the earth. So they did, that in the springtime youths and maidens might pluck the little blue flower that breathes of constant love. End of Legend of the Violet by Frances Jenkins Olcott. Read by Betty B.
Tales of Folk and Fairies by Catherine Pyle. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Wise Girl, a Serbian Story. There once was a girl who was wiser than the king and all his counselors. There never was anything like it. Her father was so proud of her that he boasted about her cleverness at home and abroad. He could not keep his tongue still about it. One day he was boasting to one of his neighbors, and he said, "That girl is so clever that not even the king himself could ask her a question she couldn't answer, or read her a riddle she couldn't unravel." Now it so chanced the king was sitting at a window nearby, and he overheard what the girl's father was saying. The next day he sent for the man to come before him. "I hear you have a daughter who is so clever that no one in the kingdom can equal her. And is that so?" asked the king. Yes, it was no more than the truth. Too much could not be said of her wit and cleverness. That was well, and the king was glad to hear it. He had 30 eggs. They were fresh and good, but it would take a clever person to hatch chickens out of them. He then bade his chancellor get the eggs and give them to the man. "Take these home to your daughter," said the king, "and bid her hatch them out for me. If she succeeds, she shall have a bag of money for her pains, but if she fails, you shall be beaten as a vain boaster." The man was troubled when he heard this. Still, his daughter was so clever he was almost sure she could hatch out the eggs. He carried them home to her and told her exactly what the king had said, and it did not take the girl long to find out that the eggs had been boiled. When she told her father that, he made a great to-do. That was a pretty trick for the king to have played upon him. Now he would have to take a beating, and all the neighbors would hear about it. Would to heaven he had never had a daughter at all, if that was what came of it. The girl, however, bade him be of good cheer. "Go to bed and sleep quietly," she said. "I will think of some way out of the trouble. No harm shall come to you, even though I have to go to the palace myself and take the beating in your place." The next day the girl gave her father a bag of boiled beans, and bade him take them out to a certain place where the king rode by every day. "Wait until you see him coming," said she, "and then begin to sow the beans." At the same time he was to call out this, that, and the other so loudly that the king could not help but hear him. The man took the bag of beans and went out to the field his daughter had spoken of. He waited until he saw the king coming, and then he began to sow the beans, and at the same time to cry aloud, "Come sun, come rain, heaven grant that these boiled beans may yield me a good crop." The king was surprised that anyone should be so stupid as to think boiled beans would grow and yield a crop. He did not recognize the man, for he had only seen him once, and he stopped his horse to speak to him. "My poor man," said he, "how can you expect boiled beans to grow? Do you not know that this is impossible?" "Whatever the king commands should be possible," answered the man, "and if chickens can hatch from boiled eggs, why should not boiled beans yield a crop?" When the king heard this, he looked at the man more closely, and then he recognized him as the father of the clever daughter. "You have indeed a clever daughter," said he. "Take your beans home and bring me back the eggs I gave you." The man was very glad when he heard that, and made haste to obey. He carried the beans home and then took the eggs and brought them back to the palace of the king. After the king had received the eggs, he gave the man a handful of flax. "Take this to your clever daughter," he said, "and bid her make for me within the week a full set of sails for a large ship. If she does this, she shall receive the half of my kingdom as a reward, but if she fails, you shall have a drubbing that you will not soon forget." The man returned to his home, loudly lamenting his hard lot. "What is the matter?" asked his daughter. "Has the king set another task that I must do?" Yes, that he had, and her father showed her the flax the king had sent her and gave her the message. "Do not be troubled," said the girl. "No harm shall come to you. Go to bed and sleep quietly, and tomorrow I will send the king an answer that will satisfy him." The man believed what his daughter said. He went to bed and slept quietly. The next day the girl gave her father a small piece of wood. "Carry this to the king," said she. "Tell him I am ready to make the sails, but first let him make me of this wood a large ship, that I may fit the sails to it." The father did as the girl bade him, and the king was surprised at the cleverness of the girl in returning him such an answer. "That is all very well," said he, "and I will excuse her from this task. But here is a glass mug. Take it home to your clever daughter. Tell her it is my command that she dip out the waters from the ocean bed so that I can ride over the bottom dry shod. If she does this, I will take her for my wife. But if she fails, you shall be beaten within an inch of your life." The man took the mug and hastened home, weeping aloud and bemoaning his fate. "Well, and what is it?" asked the daughter. "What does the king demand of me now?" The man gave her the glass mug and told her what the king had said. "Do not be troubled," said the girl. "Go to bed and sleep in peace. You shall not be beaten, and soon I shall be reigning as queen over all this land." The man had trust in her. He went to bed and slept, and dreamed he saw her sitting by the king with a crown on her head. The next day the girl gave her father a bunch of tow. "Take this to the king," she said. "Tell him you have given me the mug, and I am willing to dip the sea dry. But first let him take this tow and stop up all the rivers that flow into the ocean." The man did as his daughter bade him. He took the tow to the king and told him exactly what the girl had said. Then the king saw that the girl was indeed a clever one, and he sent for her to come before him. She came just as she was, in her homespun dress and her rough shoes, and with a cap on her head. But for all her mean clothing, she was as pretty and fine as a flower, and the king was not slow to see it. Still, he wanted to make sure for himself that she was as clever as her messages had been. "Tell me," said he, "what sound can be heard the farthest throughout the world?" "The thunder that echoes through heaven and earth," answered the girl, "and your own royal commands that go from lip to lip." This reply pleased the king greatly. "And now tell me," said he, "exactly what is my royal sceptre worth?" "It is worth exactly as much as the power for which it stands," the girl replied. The king was so well satisfied with the way the girl answered that he no longer hesitated. He determined that she should be his queen, and that they should be married at once. The girl had something to say to this, however. "I am but a poor girl," said she, "and my ways are not your ways. It may well be that you will tire of me, or that you may be angry with me sometime, and send me back to my father's house to live. Promise that if this should happen, you will allow me to carry back with me from the castle the thing that has grown most precious to me." The king was willing to agree to this, but the girl was not satisfied until he had written down his promise and signed it with his own royal hand. Then she and the king were married with the greatest magnificence, and she came to live in the palace and reign over the land. Now, while the girl was still only a peasant, she had been well content to dress in homespun and live as a peasant should. But after she became queen, she would wear nothing but the most magnificent robes and jewels and ornaments, for that seemed to her only right and proper for a queen. But the king, who was of a very jealous nature, thought his wife did not care at all for him, but only for the fine things he could give her. One time the king and queen were to ride abroad together, and the queen spent so much time in dressing herself that the king was kept waiting, and he became very angry. When she appeared before him, he would not even look at her. "You care nothing for me, but only for the jewels and fine clothes you wear," he cried. "Take with you those that are the most precious to you, as I promised you, and return to your father's house. I will no longer have a wife who cares only for my possessions and not at all for me." Very well, the girl was willing to go. "And I will be happier in my father's house than I was when I first met you," said she. Nevertheless, she begged that she might spend one more night in the palace, and that she and the king might sup together once again before she returned home. To this the king agreed, for he still loved her, even though he was so angry with her. So he and his wife supped together that evening, and just at the last the queen took a golden cup and filled it with wine. Then, when the king was not looking, she put a sleeping potion in the wine and gave it to him to drink. He took it and drank to the very last drop, suspecting nothing, but soon after he sank down among the cushions in a deep sleep. Then the queen caused him to be carried to her father's house and laid in the bed there. When the king awoke the next morning, he was very much surprised to find himself in the peasant's cottage. He raised himself up on his elbow to look about him, and at once the girl came to the bedside, and she was again dressed in the coarse and common clothes she had worn before she was married. "What means this?" asked the king, "and how came I here?" "My dear husband," said the girl, "your promise was that if you ever sent me back to my father's house, I might carry with me the thing that had become most precious to me in the castle. You are that most precious thing, and I care for nothing else except as it makes me pleasing in your sight." Then the king could no longer feel jealous or angry with her. He clasped her in his arms, and they kissed each other tenderly. The same day they returned to the palace, and from that time on the king and his peasant queen lived together in the greatest love and happiness. End of Tales of Folk and Fairies by Catherine Pyle, read by Jean Pease.